The city was alive with noise that morning. Cars rolled past tall glass towers, and people hurried across the wide streets, each chasing their own dreams or running from their own troubles. In the middle of this grand place stood a bank known for its wealth and power. It was called Central Trust Bank, a giant building with golden letters above its door and marble floors that shone like mirrors inside. For most people, stepping into this bank meant stepping into the heart of money itself. That morning, while clerks worked at their desks and guards stood tall by the doors, something unusual happened. An old man slowly walked across the front steps of the bank. His clothes were simple, a long dark coat faded from years of use, and shoes that looked as if they had walked many miles. His hair was gray and thin, his beard long but neatly kept. In his right hand, he carried a plain brown sack tied with a rough rope. The sack did not look heavy, yet the way he held it made it seem important. The guards noticed him right away. They glanced at each other and smirked. To them, he looked like another poor wanderer, maybe confused, maybe looking for shelter. The people inside the bank barely gave him a second look. Men and women in fine clothes were too busy signing papers, counting money, or talking loudly into their phones. But the old man did not look lost. He walked with calm steps, his back straight, and his eyes steady. When he reached the main counter, he stood silently for a moment, waiting for the clerk to look at him. The clerk, a young man with polished hair, looked up from his papers and frowned. "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" he asked, his voice polite but clearly impatient. The old man's voice was soft yet firm. "I have come to claim my bank," he said. The clerk blinked in surprise. He thought he had misheard. "Excuse me," the old man repeated without changing his tone. "This bank is mine. I have come to claim it." The words hung in the air for a moment. A few customers nearby turned their heads. The young clerk tried not to laugh, but his lips curved in a smile he could not hide. "Sir," he said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "this is Central Trust Bank." "It is not, for claiming." "Do you mean you have an account here?" The old man shook his head. "No account. The bank itself is mine." Now the people around could not hold their laughter. A man in a fine suit chuckled and whispered something to his friend. Two women near the waiting chairs covered their mouths to hide their giggles. Even the guard by the door shook his head, amused by what he thought was nonsense. The old man remained calm. His eyes did not move from the clerk. "Fetch your manager," he said. The young clerk raised his eyebrows. Normally, he would have called security right away. But something in the old man's tone made him hesitate. It was not loud or threatening, but there was weight in it, like a stone dropping into still water. Finally, the clerk pressed a button and called for the bank manager. After a few minutes, a tall man in a fine gray suit walked out from his office. His name was Darren, and he was known for being strict and proud of his position. He had managed the bank for more than 10 years and believed he understood everything about money, law, and ownership. He looked at the old man, then at the sack in his hand, and frowned. "What seems to be the problem here?" The clerk cleared his throat. "Sir, this man says he owns the bank." Darren raised one eyebrow and let out a short laugh. He turned to the old man. "You claim ownership of Central Trust Bank?" The old man nodded once. "Yes." Darren crossed his arms, a smile playing on his lips. "Do you have documents? Proof? Deeds? Anything that says this bank belongs to you?" The old man's answer was steady. "What proves ownership is not paper. It is what lies in this sack." He lifted the brown sack slightly, then set it back on the counter. His hand rested gently on top of it, as if calming something alive inside. Darren chuckled, and this time others laughed with him. The sound of amusement spread across the hall. Customers whispered jokes, and a few even took out their phones, pretending to record what they thought was a silly moment. But among the crowd, one person did not laugh. She was a young clerk named Lena, working at a nearby desk. She had sharp eyes and a quiet nature, often watching things others ignored. While everyone else laughed, she noticed something strange. When the light from the tall windows hit the sack, faint lines appeared on the fabric, lines that looked like glowing symbols, as if stitched by invisible fire. They vanished quickly when the old man moved, but she knew what she had seen. Her heart gave a small jump. She stared at the sack, then at the old man's calm face. There was no fear in his eyes, no confusion, only certainty. Darren, still smiling, gestured to the guards. "Escort this man out. He's wasting our time." The guards stepped forward, their boots clicking against the marble floor. But before they could reach him, the old man spoke again. His voice was quiet, yet it carried through the entire hall. "You laughed today," he said, "but soon, you will regret it." The laughter weakened for a moment. Some people frowned, uncomfortable with the calm way he spoke. The guards paused, unsure why the words made them hesitate. The old man placed both hands on the sack. The fabric pulsed once, faintly, like a heartbeat. Lena gasped softly, though no one else seemed to notice. He looked directly at Darren. "This bank was built on what was stolen from me. I have come to take it back. You may test me if you wish, but the sack does not lie." The room grew strangely still. Even those who had laughed felt a strange chill. The hum of the lights above seemed louder, and the ticking of the large wall clock echoed like a drum. For the first time, Darren's smile faded just a little. He forced a laugh to cover it, but his eyes narrowed. The old man waited. His hands rested on the sack, and the faint glow flickered again. And though no one admitted it aloud, a single thought entered the minds of all who saw him: what if he was telling the truth? The air inside Central Trust Bank no longer felt normal. What began as a moment of laughter now carried a strange weight that no one could ignore. The old man, Morrow, stood quietly with his sack, as if time itself belonged to him. His calm voice still echoed in people's minds: "This bank is mine. I have come to claim it." Manager Darren, though proud and confident, could not fully shake off the unease those words brought. Still, he would never allow his staff or the customers to see doubt in his face. Straightening his suit, he gave a sharp nod to the guards. "Remove him," Darren ordered firmly. "He is disturbing business." The two guards stepped forward once more. Their heavy boots rang against the marble floor as they closed in. But just as they reached out to touch Morrow's arm, the sack pulsed again. A faint ripple of light ran across its surface, glowing symbols flashing for a brief moment. The guards froze. Their hands hovered in the air but did not land on him. A strange pressure filled their chests, like a silent warning telling them not to touch. Morrow slowly raised his head. His voice was low, yet everyone in the bank heard it clearly. "If you lay a hand on me, the sack will answer. I have come in peace, but the sack does not forgive mockery." The guards exchanged worried looks. For a moment, they stood still, uncertain. Darren clenched his jaw, annoyed at their hesitation. "Nonsense," he barked. "He is just an old man with a bag of tricks. Do your job." But even as he spoke, some part of Darren's heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, the old man's warning was not a trick. The laughter that had filled the hall earlier had gone silent. People now whispered in low voices, their smiles fading into uneasy frowns. Mothers held their children close, and men who had earlier scoffed now kept their eyes fixed on the sack, waiting for it to move again. Lena, the young clerk who had seen the glowing symbols before, leaned closer to her desk, her eyes never leaving the sack. She wanted to believe it was just her imagination, but the symbols had been real, she was sure of it. Her hands trembled as she shuffled her papers, trying to hide her nervousness from the others. Finally, Darren stepped closer to Morrow, standing tall as if to prove his authority. "You say you own this bank," Darren said, his voice sharp. "Ownership requires proof. Show us deeds, contracts, anything. Otherwise, you are just a storyteller wasting our time." Morrow's lips curved into the faintest smile. "What proves ownership is not always written on paper. What proves ownership is the truth that cannot be erased. This bank was built with what was taken from me. And the sack holds the witness." His hand rested gently on the sack again, and the fabric shifted as though something inside moved on its own. A faint hum spread across the marble floor, so subtle most people did not notice, but Lena felt it under her shoes. She bit her lip and looked around. Nobody else seemed to react, but she knew something strange was happening. Darren scoffed loudly. "Witness? Do you expect me to believe that a sack can hold proof of ownership? Enough of this nonsense." He turned to the crowd and spread his hands as if presenting a show. "Ladies and gentlemen, here we see how wild tales can fool the weak. This man thinks carrying an old sack gives him power. But I assure you, this bank stands on firm law, not on the words of strangers." Some people laughed again, though the laughter was softer than before, more forced than genuine. Others did not join in at all. Their eyes were still fixed on the sack. Morrow did not argue. He simply looked at Darren with calm, steady eyes, the way a mountain might look at a storm, unshaken, unmoved. "You laugh to hide your fear," Morrow said gently. "But inside, you already know something is wrong. The bank is not what you think it is. You believe it belongs to you, but the sack remembers the truth." His words sent another shiver through the crowd. Lena finally spoke, her voice soft but clear enough to be heard. "Manager Darren. I saw the sack glow. I saw marks on it. Symbols I have never seen before." The entire hall went silent. All eyes turned to her. Her face burned with embarrassment, but she did not look away. "It's true. I saw it. Maybe we should listen before we laugh." Darren's face darkened. He hated the idea of his authority being questioned, especially by a young clerk. "Lena," he snapped, "do not let your imagination make you a fool. There are no glowing marks. It is nothing but a bag." But even as he said it, a murmur of doubt spread among the people. If one person had seen it, maybe others had too. And if others had not seen it, perhaps they had simply missed the moment. Morrow inclined his head slightly toward Lena, as if thanking her without words. Then he looked back at Darren. "The doubt has begun. You cannot stop it now. Every person in this hall has felt it in their hearts. They know I speak truth." Darren tightened his fists. "Truth or lie, I will not allow my bank to be disrupted. Show us, then. Show us what is in the sack." The old man's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained steady. "Not yet. If I open it now, you will regret it too soon. I have come to claim what is mine with patience. I give you a chance to surrender willingly. If you refuse, the sack will decide." The crowd gasped softly. Some people stepped back toward the doors, but none dared to leave. Curiosity pinned them to the marble floor. The hum under Lena's shoes grew stronger. She glanced down and saw the faintest shimmer of light running like a crack through the stone. She quickly looked up, her heart racing. Nobody else seemed to notice. Darren, trying to hold on to his pride, forced a smile. "Very well," he said coldly. "If you think your sack has power, prove it. Until then, you are nothing but a beggar with stories." Morrow's expression did not change. He simply placed both hands on the sack and whispered so softly that only those closest could hear, "The sack will prove itself. Not I." And with those words, a quiet stillness spread through the bank, as if the building itself was listening. The marble hall of Central Trust Bank felt heavier with every passing second. A silence hung in the air, broken only by the soft hum of computers and the nervous whispers of customers who no longer left. Morrow, the old man with the sack, stood calmly in the center. His wrinkled hands rested on the rope that tied the sack, as though he were speaking not only to people, but also to the strange object itself. His quiet words, "The sack will prove itself. Not I," still echoed in many minds. Manager Darren, however, refused to let fear show. His pride would not allow him to believe an old wanderer could threaten his authority or the reputation of the bank. Straightening his shoulders, he gave a loud command. "Enough of this," Darren said, his voice firm. "You speak in riddles, old man. You speak of truth without proof. This is a place of law, order, and money, not fairy tales." Morrow slowly lifted his gaze and looked at Darren. His dark eyes, calm and unblinking, made even the proud manager feel a small flicker of unease. "You call them fairy tales because you fear they may be true," Morrow said. His voice was not raised, yet every corner of the hall carried his words. "But listen carefully, Darren. I have come not only for myself. I have come because the sack remembers. It does not forgive, and it does not forget." The crowd shifted uneasily. A woman near the entrance whispered, "What does he mean?" but no one answered. Darren forced a sharp laugh. "You say the sack remembers? Very well. Tell us what it remembers." The old man nodded slowly. He ran his hand over the rough fabric of the sack, as if calming a restless child. The faint symbols Lena had noticed earlier flickered again for the briefest moment. Then he spoke. "Many years ago," Morrow began, "before this city had towers of glass, before streets were filled with engines and noise, I was trusted with a gift. It was not gold. It was not silver. It was something far greater, something alive. I was its guardian." His voice dropped, but the hall was so quiet that every ear caught his words. "But greedy men came," Morrow continued. "They saw not life, but power. They tricked me, and they took what was mine to protect. They built their wealth upon it. And from that wealth, they raised this very bank. You see before you not a house of law, but a house built on theft." A wave of murmurs ran through the crowd. People looked at each other, unsure what to believe. Some shook their heads, unwilling to accept such a strange tale. But others felt the truth hidden within his words, a truth their hearts could not deny. Darren sneered. "An old story? Nothing more. You think you can frighten us with myths? You insult the intelligence of this city." Morrow's eyes softened, almost with pity. "I do not tell you this to frighten. I tell you this to warn. The sack holds what remains of that gift. It is patient, but its patience is ending. If I open it, the sack will not only remind you of the theft, it will demand what is owed." Gasps filled the air. Some customers edged toward the doors, though none dared leave. The guards, who once stood tall, now shifted uneasily, their hands hovering near their belts but unwilling to take another step forward. Lena could not look away from Morrow. Her heart raced, not from fear alone but from a strange sense of awe. Every word he spoke felt heavy, like stones dropped into water, rippling outward. She remembered the shimmer of light beneath her feet earlier, the faint hum she alone had felt. Could this really be true? Could a bank, a place of money and stone, have been built on something stolen from beyond? Darren, unwilling to lose control, raised his voice. "Enough of this nonsense. You dare claim we live off stolen power? You dare say this bank does not belong to its rightful owners? You are a liar, old man. A fraud." The insult rolled off Morrow like water. His calm never broke. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, his voice softer than before, yet sharper. "If I am a liar, then you have nothing to fear. Let the sack open, and it will show nothing. But if I speak the truth, then every coin, every note, every line in your ledgers is dust built on stolen ground. Think well before you call me a fraud. The words hit like a blow. The crowd murmured louder now, their whispers turning into uneasy questions. Some looked at Darren with doubt, others with fear. For the first time, the mighty manager's voice seemed weaker than the old man's quiet tone. Darren clenched his fists. You speak of doom, but you show nothing. If you have power, then show it. Morrow shook his head slowly. Not yet. You must understand the cost first. If the sack opens now, it will not close again until the debt is paid. That debt is not small. It belongs not only to this bank, but to the city, and perhaps beyond. His words settled like heavy dust. Lena felt a chill crawl up her arms. She imagined what might happen if the sack truly opened. She remembered the hum, the light, the way the guards had frozen. It was no trick, she was certain now. Please, she whispered softly, though no one heard her. Don't open it yet. Morrow lifted his head higher, speaking to all in the hall. This is your warning. I did not come to destroy. I came to claim. If the bank surrenders willingly, the sack will rest. But if pride blinds you, the sack will wake, and none of you will control what follows. The crowd grew restless. Some called out for the manager to listen. Others demanded the old man leave. The room was divided, half in doubt, half in fear. Darren's face flushed red. He felt his authority slipping, and anger rose in him. Pointing a finger at Morrow, he shouted, You will not threaten us? This is my bank, my authority, and I will not surrender it to a beggar with stories and a bag of tricks. Guards, remove him. But once again, the guards did not move. Their eyes were locked on the sack, their bodies frozen by something they could not explain. Morrow sighed softly, as if disappointed but not surprised. So be it. I have given my warning. When the sack speaks for itself, your laughter will turn to regret. His hand pressed gently against the sack, and the faint glow returned, brighter this time. The symbols burned for a moment, then faded. The marble under his feet hummed again, and this time several people gasped, feeling the vibration. Darren's voice faltered. What trick is this? Morrow looked at him one last time. No trick. A warning. And then, as silence fell once more, everyone in the hall knew, something far beyond their understanding was hidden in that simple sack. The bank was silent, yet the silence was heavy, filled with fear and doubt. Customers and clerks who had once laughed now stood frozen, staring at the old man with the sack. Morrow's warning still echoed in their ears, when the sack speaks for itself, your laughter will turn to regret. Manager Darren's face was pale, though he tried hard to hide it. He tapped his foot against the marble floor, his voice sharp with forced confidence. You think glowing cloth and whispers will frighten us? You claim you own this bank, but all I see is an old wanderer with a bag. If you have power, then show us. Enough of riddles. Prove it. Morrow gave no reply at first. He lowered his gaze to the sack resting on the marble floor. Slowly, he untied the rope that bound it. His movements were calm, steady, almost like a ritual. The crowd held its breath, afraid of what might happen when the rope came loose. Lena's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her desk. She wanted to tell him not to open it, but her voice would not come out. She could only watch, her wide eyes fixed on the sack. The rope slipped free. For a long moment, nothing happened. Some customers sighed with relief, thinking perhaps it was all a trick. A man near the doors even chuckled nervously, whispering, See? Nothing. But then the air changed. A low hum spread across the hall, soft at first, like the distant sound of wind through a cave. The lights above flickered, their glow unsteady. The marble beneath their feet shivered faintly, as if the building itself had taken a breath. The sack shifted on its own. It did not open, but something inside pressed against the fabric, pushing gently outward. Strange golden lines, like living roots of light, crawled across the surface of the sack, weaving patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. Gasps filled the hall. The man who had chuckled stepped back quickly, his face pale. Morrow placed one hand on the sack and whispered a single word in a language no one understood. Instantly, the golden light expanded, spilling out in waves across the floor. The marble cracked with a sharp sound, and glowing lines spread outward like branches of a tree. The guards staggered back, their eyes wide. Their hands reached for their weapons, but they found themselves unable to lift them. Their arms felt heavy, as though weighed down by unseen chains. One of the women near the entrance screamed softly, covering her mouth with both hands. The glow climbed the tall marble pillars, crawling upward like veins of fire. The Grand Bank, once a proud monument of wealth, now looked alive with golden roots stretching across its walls and ceiling. The computers at the counters flickered, screens going black one by one. Phones died in people's hands, their glowing screens fading into darkness. "What is happening?" someone whispered, their voice trembling. Morrow's eyes were calm, unshaken. He stroked the sack as if it were a living creature. "The sack remembers," he said. "It shows you what lies beneath this place. This bank was built on stolen life. That life stirs now." Darren stumbled back, his heart racing. He wanted to deny it, to laugh, to call it illusion, but the ground shook beneath his feet. The marble cracked further, glowing lines splitting apart like lightning frozen in stone. The very building trembled with a deep, hidden power. "No, this is impossible," Darren whispered, his voice weak. Lena rose from her desk, her legs shaking, but her eyes were locked on Morrow. For the first time, she believed him completely. The sack was not a trick. Whatever lived inside it was real, and it was far beyond anything they could understand. "Please," she whispered, though her voice was lost in the noise. "Stop, they don't understand," but Morrow did not stop. He lifted his hand, and the glow in the sack pulsed stronger. A wave of warmth spread across the hall. People gasped, not in pain, but in awe. The warmth touched their skin, and for a moment, they felt something impossible, a sense of endless space, like standing beneath stars, like hearing the heartbeat of the world itself. Some fell to their knees. Others wept quietly, unable to explain why. Darren, trembling, shouted in anger to cover his fear. "Stop this madness. I will not let you destroy my bank." He lunged forward, reaching for the sack. The moment his hand came near, a golden flash burst outward. Darren was thrown back several feet, landing hard against the marble floor. He groaned, clutching his chest, his face pale with shock. The sack pulsed again, brighter now, its glow filling the entire hall. For a moment, it was as if the roof had vanished. People looked up and gasped. They no longer saw the ceiling but an endless night sky filled with stars, more than any human eye had ever seen. Galaxies swirled above them, vast and endless. The vision lasted only a heartbeat, but it left the hall trembling with awe. When the light faded slightly, Morrow tied the rope around the sack again. The glow sank back into the fabric, though faint golden lines still traced its surface like veins. The silence that followed was heavy. No one laughed now. No one dared. Morrow looked around the hall, his eyes calm but sad. "This is only a whisper of what the sack holds. A whisper, and already your bank trembles. Do not test it further." Customers backed away, whispering to one another. Some stared at the old man with fear, others with respect. A few even bowed their heads as if standing before something sacred. Lena's heart pounded. She felt as if she had witnessed something meant only for legends. She wanted to ask him questions: what was inside the sack, where it came from, why it chose him, but her voice refused to rise. Darren struggled to his feet, his pride wounded. His suit was dusty, his hair disheveled, but his stubbornness burned stronger than his fear. He pointed a shaking hand at Morrow. "You will not scare me away," he said, though his voice cracked. "This bank belongs to the city. It belongs to its people, not to an old man with tricks." Morrow's gaze did not harden, but softened, almost with sorrow. "I did not come to scare. I came to remind. You have one chance left, Darren. Surrender willingly, or the sack will open wider. And if it does, you will not only lose this bank, you will lose much more." The crowd shivered at his words. None dared laugh now. None dared doubt. The demonstration had ended, but the fear had just begun. The hall of Central Trust Bank was no longer the same place. A few minutes ago, it was filled with polished marble, shining lights, and proud voices of business. Now, cracks of glowing light still marked the floor and pillars, and fear had replaced laughter. People whispered in low voices, their eyes fixed on the old man and the sack at his side. Morrow stood tall and calm in the center, as though he had been waiting for this moment all his life. His hand rested gently on the sack, which now seemed alive, faint golden veins still glowing under its rough fabric. No one dared to move too close. Even the guards who once stood ready with strength now kept their distance, their faces pale. Manager Darren, however, could not accept what he had seen. His pride was stronger than the fear that gripped his heart. He straightened his suit and brushed the dust from his sleeves, forcing his voice to sound steady. "You think glowing lights and illusions make you master of this place," Darren said sharply. "You are a fraud. I demand the truth. What is inside that sack? What trick are you playing on us?" The old man raised his eyes slowly. His voice was calm, heavy with meaning. "You ask for the truth, Darren. Very well. I will tell you." The crowd fell into complete silence. Every ear leaned toward his words. Morrow drew a deep breath and began. "Long ago, before this city rose from the dust, I was chosen as guardian of something beyond value. It was not a jewel. It was not a coin. It was a seed, the seed of Terra. A living fragment of a machine older than men, older than nations. It was born in the stars and given to me to protect." Gasps spread across the hall. Some customers exchanged doubtful looks, but no one dared interrupt him. "This seed," Morrow continued, his hand stroking the sack, "was no ordinary treasure. It was a source of creation itself. Wherever it rested, life would grow. Energy would rise. Entire cities could be built on its breath. But it was never meant for greed. It was meant for balance." His voice grew heavier, filled with quiet sorrow. "But men came. They saw not life, but power. They promised friendship, they promised help, but their words were false. They tricked me. They stole the seed, and from its hidden power, they built wealth. With it, they raised this bank. Every stone in these walls, every coin in your vaults, every record in your ledgers owed its existence to what was stolen." The crowd stirred in shock. Some shook their heads, unwilling to believe. Others whispered in fear, for deep inside, the story felt too real to deny. Lena, the young clerk, pressed her hand to her mouth. Her eyes glistened as she listened. She had felt the hum under her feet, had seen the glow with her own eyes. Now she understood, it was not magic, not trickery. It was life itself, hidden inside that old sack. Darren's face was red with anger. "A story? That is all? You speak of seeds and stars as if they were real. Do you expect me to believe this bank, this institution of law, was built on your fairy tale?" Morrow's eyes did not waver. "It is no tale. You saw the truth with your own eyes. The seed still lives. It calls for what was stolen. And now I have come to claim it back." One man from the crowd, dressed in fine clothes, stepped forward nervously. "If what you say is true, He asked carefully, then what happens to us? To the money we hold here. Morrow turned his gaze toward him. The seed does not care for numbers on paper or weight of gold. It cares only for balance. If you surrender this house willingly, it may forgive. But if you resist, the seed will strip away every false layer built on its stolen power. Then nothing will remain. A chill spread through the hall. People clutched their purses, their briefcases, their phones, suddenly aware that all their wealth was tied to the bank. Darren slammed his hand on the counter. Lies. This is nothing but a trick to frighten us. You want us to give up the bank, to hand over power to you. I will not allow it. Morrow looked at him with quiet sadness. You have already seen what happens when the seed stirs. Do you think your pride can stop it? The memory of golden roots crawling up the pillars returned to everyone's minds. Darren's shouting seemed smaller now compared to the calm certainty of Morrow's words. Lena finally found her voice. She stepped forward, her hands trembling but her eyes steady. I believe him, she said softly. I saw the symbols on the sack before anyone else noticed. I felt the floor shake under my feet. This is not a trick. This is real. Her voice, though quiet, carried weight. Others nodded slowly, admitting they too had seen, they too had felt. The tide of belief began to shift. Darren glared at Lena, furious. You are a clerk, nothing more. Do not let imagination fool you. But his words no longer held the same power. Doubt had already crept into the hearts of many. Morrow lifted the sack slightly, letting its golden glow flicker once more. The truth is before you. You may laugh again if you wish, but soon the seed will decide. And when it does, no man's wealth will save him. He set the sack back down with care, and the cracks in the marble pulsed faintly. The sound of the hum returned, deeper now, like a warning heartbeat. The people in the hall began to murmur louder, voices filled with worry. Some called for surrender, saying it was safer to listen. Others still clung to doubt, afraid of losing everything they trusted. Darren, though shaken, clenched his fists. His pride would not break. He looked at Morrow with burning eyes. You may tell your stories, you may show your tricks, but I will not surrender this bank. It belongs to the city, to its law, not to a man with a sack of lies. Morrow's sigh was long and weary, like the wind through old trees. Then the choice is made. I offered peace. You refused. The seed will take what is owed. The glow on the sack brightened for a heartbeat, then settled again, as though waiting for the final moment. The truth had been spoken. Now the bank, and all who stood within it, would soon face what that truth meant. The great hall of Central Trust Bank was silent again, but this silence was heavy. It pressed against everyone's chest like weight. The sack by Morrow's side glowed faintly, and its hum filled the air like a heartbeat, steady but stronger with each passing moment. People who once laughed at the old man now stood pale and restless. Fear had replaced their pride. Their eyes kept drifting toward the sack, as if waiting for it to burst open. Morrow remained calm, his eyes deep and steady. He looked like a man who had already seen the end. The seed is merciful, he said quietly. But mercy does not last forever. You had the chance to return what was stolen. The words struck every ear like a hammer. Manager Darren, however, still fought against fear. His pride was his shield, but it was cracking. Sweat rolled down his forehead though the hall was cool. He stepped forward, his voice loud but shaky. You threaten us with stories. You want to break this bank with fear. But I will not give you that power. This bank stands on law, not fairy tales. The moment he finished, the lights above flickered. The hum grew louder. Cracks of golden light spread again across the marble floor, weaving toward the walls and columns. Gasps filled the hall. People pulled back, some screaming, some clutching their belongings. The columns trembled. Golden roots of light climbed upward, wrapping around them like living vines. The strong marble looked weak in their glow. "This is no story," Morrow said. His voice was calm but full of warning. "The seed remembers what was taken. It will not allow false ownership to stand." Darren's face drained of color. He stumbled backward, his eyes fixed on the glowing cracks. He wanted to speak, to command, but his words caught in his throat. The customers began shouting. "What is happening? Will the building fall? Someone stop this!" But no one could stop it. Lena, the young clerk, pressed her hand against the counter for balance. Her eyes widened as she watched the roots spread across the floor, weaving like rivers of light. She turned to Darren, her voice sharp with fear. "Can't you see? This is real. We must listen to him before it's too late." Darren shook his head, but his hands trembled. "No, no, this cannot be. This is my bank. I built my life here. I cannot." His voice broke before he finished. The sack pulsed again, brighter this time, and a deep sound rolled through the air like thunder under the ground. The whole building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, and people screamed, rushing toward the doors. But when they tried to leave, the golden roots climbed across the walls, sealing the doors shut with glowing patterns. No one could escape. Panic spread. Some people pounded on the sealed doors. Others cried, clutching their families. Fear filled every corner of the once proud bank. Morrow raised his hand gently, asking for silence. His voice carried through the chaos. "Running will not save you. Fighting will not save you. Only truth can save you. Return what belongs to the seed." The people looked to Darren. Their eyes begged him. Some even shouted, "Give him what he wants. Do something before we all lose everything." But Darren's pride still chained him. He clenched his fists, his face twisted between fear and stubbornness. This bank belongs to the city. To the people. Not to him. As soon as he said the words, the floor split wide. Golden light poured out, blinding the hall. From the crack rose a figure, not flesh, not stone, but pure energy shaped like a tree, its roots glowing deep, its branches stretching high with leaves of light. The people fell to their knees in terror. The seed had awakened. Its voice was not a sound but a vibration in every heart. It spoke inside them, heavy and deep. Balance was broken. Life was taken. False crowns were built on stolen breath. Balance must return. Everyone trembled. Some wept openly. Even the proudest men lowered their heads. Darren shook, his lips whispering, "No, this cannot be," but his voice was weak, like a child lost. The glowing tree turned its light toward Morrow, then toward the building itself. The marble began to crumble under the pressure of its glow. Morrow's voice rose again, calm but filled with sorrow. "This is the moment of regret. You laughed when truth was spoken. You mocked what you did not understand. Now you see the cost." The people cried out, begging, "Stop it. Please stop it." But Morrow shook his head slowly. "I offered peace. I warned you. Now the seed itself speaks. I cannot stop what has begun." The glowing tree stretched its roots across the walls. Golden light climbed over every window, every painting, every vault door. The proud decorations of the bank melted away into dust. Coins turned to ash. Notes burned without flame. The records vanished, erased as if they had never existed. Wealth, once worshipped, was gone in moments. The people wailed, clutching at empty hands. Years of savings, business, pride all disappeared like smoke. Lena fell to her knees, tears rolling down her face. But her tears were not only for lost wealth. They were for the truth that had been ignored. She whispered, "We should have listened, we should have believed." The regret filled every corner of the hall. Darren dropped to the floor, his hands clawing at the dust where once stood his empire of wealth. His voice was broken now, full of despair. Please, give it back, please, but there was no answer. The seed had judged. Morrow stood silent, watching the sorrow. His face showed no joy, no triumph, only deep sadness. He had not wanted this. He had hoped they would choose wisely. But they had chosen pride, and now they faced regret. The glowing tree began to fade, its light sinking back into the ground. The cracks slowly sealed, leaving only silence behind. The building stood empty, hollow, stripped of wealth and power. Only the sack remained, glowing faintly at Morrow's side. The people sat in despair, broken and hopeless. They finally understood the price of laughter, of disbelief, of greed. The old man whispered, more to himself than to them, this was not punishment. This was balance. No one answered. Their regret was too heavy. The bank, once the heart of pride, now stood as nothing but stone and silence. The sun rose slowly over the city the next morning, but Central Trust Bank was no longer the same. Its tall marble walls stood cracked, hollow, and silent. The golden letters above the entrance were gone, and the prideful aura that had once radiated from it had vanished completely. People gathered around the building, whispering in awe and fear. Word had spread quickly about the events of the previous day. Some had witnessed the glowing roots of light, others had heard the hum beneath their feet, but all agreed on one thing: the bank had been stripped bare, and the old man with the sack Morrow was gone. Lena arrived early, stepping carefully over the broken marble. Her eyes scanned the hall, now empty except for dust and fragments of the glowing cracks that remained faintly visible. The air still carried a low hum, barely audible, like the memory of something alive. She knelt to touch the floor. The hum under her fingertips was faint but persistent. She remembered Morrow's words from the day before: this was not punishment. This was balance. Slowly, she stood and looked toward the doorway. Outside, the crowd murmured, unsure what to think. Some people shook their heads, refusing to believe what they had seen. Others looked thoughtful, realizing how fragile their wealth and pride had been. In the center of the empty hall, the brown sack sat, untouched, glowing softly. It seemed smaller now, less alive, as if it had returned the power it once contained. The golden lines flickered one last time before fading completely. Lena stepped closer, her hands shaking. She gently lifted the sack, feeling its warmth, its quiet weight. She understood, suddenly, that the sack was not merely a container. It was a symbol, a keeper of truth. Whoever held it carried responsibility. A soft voice spoke behind her. You understand now, don't you? She turned to see Morrow standing at the doorway. He looked older than she remembered, his coat faded, his beard longer. But his eyes were calm, full of quiet wisdom. Yes, Lena whispered. I understand. The seed, it was never about wealth. It was about balance. About truth. Morrow nodded. Many never learn. They cling to pride, to money, to power. They forget what is real. I offered them a chance, and they chose otherwise. You saw. You listened. That is why the seed allowed you to remain. Lena's hands tightened around the sack. What will happen to it now? Morrow smiled faintly. The seed rests where it belongs. But it is patient. It waits for the next time truth must be restored. The sack holds what remains of its life, a reminder that balance is not optional. She looked around the hall, at the empty counters, the shattered glass, the dust-covered floor. And the bank, she asked quietly. Morrow's eyes softened. The building is empty, yes. But the city remains. The people will rebuild, if they remember this lesson. Let wealth come from work and honesty, not theft and pride. That is the legacy the seed leaves behind. A small crowd had begun to gather outside. People stared at the shattered building, whispering in awe and fear. Some approached slowly, unsure whether to enter. Others stood at a distance, reflecting on their own choices. Lena looked back at Morrow. "Will you return?" she asked. The old man shook his head gently. "My time here is done. My role was to guide, not to rule. The seed will guide those who choose to listen. I will walk on, as I always have. And when it is needed again, the sack will appear. Until then," he let his words trail into silence. He turned and walked away, his steps calm and measured, the crowd watching in quiet amazement. Lena held the sack close, feeling its warmth and weight. She knew it was more than a symbol, it was a responsibility. For hours, people lingered around the bank. Some came to apologize silently to the empty walls, others to take stock of what they had lost. Stories of the glowing roots, of the trembling marble, of the golden hum spread quickly. By midday, a few brave souls entered the hall. They saw Lena standing with the sack, her eyes steady and serious. She did not speak, but her presence commanded respect. Those who had once mocked now bowed their heads slightly, understanding that this was not the place of laughter any longer. Days passed. The city began to rebuild, not just its buildings, but its ways. People worked harder, treated each other with honesty, and respected the balance that had been restored. The story of the old man and the sack became a lesson whispered in offices, schools, and homes. Morrow was never seen again, but the legacy of the seed and the lesson of balance lived on. The sack remained with Lena, a silent reminder that true power comes not from wealth, but from truth, respect, and responsibility. Years later, the city had grown taller and brighter, but Central Trust Bank remained a hollow monument, a warning to those who might forget. Lena had become a leader in her own right, using what she had learned to guide others. The sack, ever quiet, sat nearby, its golden glow visible only to those who needed to see it. One evening, Lena stood alone in the empty hall, holding the sack gently. The sunlight streamed through the broken windows, catching the faint golden traces on the fabric. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "The seed is alive. The balance remains. And we must not forget." As she set the sack down, a soft hum filled the hall. Not loud, not frightening, just a gentle reminder that some things are greater than wealth, greater than pride, and even greater than fear. The city continued to grow, its people wiser and more careful. And though the bank was never restored to its former glory, its story became legend. Children were told of the old man, the mysterious sack, and the seed of Terra. They learned that pride and greed carry consequences, but that truth and balance, once respected, create a stronger foundation than any marble walls or piles of gold. Morrow's steps were gone from the streets, but the lesson remained. The seed had chosen its guardian, and that guardian had passed its knowledge on. A legacy of truth, balance, and quiet strength lingered, unseen yet powerful, waiting to guide those who remembered it. And in the center of the empty hall, the sack pulsed faintly once, a whisper of life, a promise of balance, and a reminder that laughter born of disbelief can always turn to regret unless one chooses to see the truth.